first couple days were just like a normal baby, nothing wrong. He was eating, he was totally fine. And then I think at 6 days old actually is when he started to not eat properly, and I started noticing these spasms is what I was calling them. When we got to the ER, he hadn't been eating, so he had gone actually 8 hours without eating anything. And so we went in, he was jaundiced, he was having spasms probably every 10 to 15 minutes, and he was actually spitting up blood, so they admitted him very quickly after.
So I first met Maverick and his family in the NICU, the neonatal intensive care unit at Rady Children's Hospital. He was 8 days old at that point, and he was having terrible seizures that were not responding to medications, and he had jerky movements of his extremities. He was making sucking movements even though he wasn't feeding. He was having abnormal eye movements, and he was not responsive at all when I was examining him. So it was a very, very abnormal exam for a little baby.
They weren't sure what was causing the seizures, so they got him hooked up to the EEG, and they started doing blood work. Actually in the ER they did a spinal tap. So from that point to the next couple of days, it was probably over 30 tests, I would say. I
was very concerned if he survived this episode that he may be left with permanent brain damage. He was very, very sick and had continued really not to respond to any medications.
At one point his kidneys started to shut down, and I started thinking, is he gonna make it?
We had a sample from baby and both parents, and we were able to, once we got those in the lab on, I believe, a Wednesday morning, we were able to very quickly get them loaded onto the sequencer and process them and arrive at a diagnosis about 39 hours after the samples arrived in the lab. Part of my research time working in the Institute was actually doing genome interpretation. So I had seen him at the bedside, but then was also part of the team that was analyzing his results. And we saw that Maverick contained 2 mutations in one particular gene called ALDH7A1. And that gene, that's the gene that's responsible for causing a very rare form of seizures called pyridoxine-dependent epilepsy. And so we were able to see that Maverick had inherited one of each of those faulty copies of the gene from each of his parents. And because both copies had a faulty change in them, it likely was causing the gene not to function properly and can cause intractable seizures. They had tried a particular medication. It's pyridoxine or vitamin B6 as kind of a last ditch effort to try to see if we could get him to respond. Shortly after he was given that initial dose, we found his diagnosis. And so we were able to call the neonatologists, call the neurologists, and let them know the diagnosis and that they should continue the pyridoxine, because on average kids with this disorder may take 2 or 3 days to respond to the medication. We were able to notify them of that recommendation, as well as there are some specific dietary interventions that you can do for kids with this condition, and so they were able to make some changes to his treatment. And after about 36 hours after that diagnosis was given, he was actually no longer seizing. His parents were able to hold him, and he was able to eat. And about a week and a half later, he was able to go home with his parents. So it was a pretty amazing turnaround for this little guy.
Being given that offer to do the genetic testing was such a blessing, and it was like, if we can find anything to stop his pain, that's what we want to do.
This diagnosis can be made in other ways, but those can take weeks to obtain those tests. And so you can imagine in Maverick's case, he was very, very sick and we didn't have time. So undergoing rapid whole genome sequencing was the key to his diagnosis and his change in management, and I believe his good outcome to this point. This had important information for the parents as well. So they're both young, and they were each found, again, to be carriers for this condition.
If we decided to have more children, then I would just have to take a B6 supplement to ensure that it goes through me to the baby.
I would love to see this test available to every NICU because I think it could be absolutely life-changing.
It's amazing to see how big he's gotten, you know, the things that he's able to do, and it's just been amazing to watch him grow as a big boy, little big boy.